Hello there. Welcome to another interview from the Tillamook Air Museum, where we bring you amazing stories from those intimately connected or affected by aviation in some way or another. Today's interview has been a long time in coming. Our guest today, Chris Haile, I have known for several years now, actually, and his story is quite unique in that there are not many like it out there. It is compelling, heartbreaking, captivating, and heroic all at the same time. I'm honored to be able to share Chris's story with you today. So, this story begins many years ago with Chris, only 5 years old at the time, and his parents being aboard TWA Flight 128 on November the 20th, 1967. The flight was traveling from Los Angeles to Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport, known then as the Greater Cincinnati Airport. Tragically, though, the Convair 880, on which Chris and his family were aboard, crashed on approach to the airport, ending up in an orchard shortly before 9 p.m., killing 70 of the 82 passengers aboard, including Chris's parents. With freezing temperatures outside and snow on the ground, Chris was miraculously saved by TWA Hostess Ellie Kurtock. It's here where we're going to start our story. So, Chris, welcome to the interview today. It is wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Christian. Happy to be here.
So, tell me, Chris, can you tell me where you were born and lived and grew up?
I was born in the San Fernando Valley in a little town called Sylmar. And that's where I was born and where I was basically raised till I was 5 years old until the crash occurred.
Now, tell me a little bit about your parents and what you know about them, what you remember about them, and what they did for a living.
My parents, my father was a heavy equipment operator, and he actually bought the business from my grandparents, and my mother was a homemaker and lived in Southern California and had my sister and myself.
Wow! And so, what are some of your earliest memories prior to the accident with your parents?
You know, I don't have a lot of memories. You know, I was pretty young, 5 at the time of the crash, and I remember my dad being a hardworking guy, and I remember on the weekends I would accompany him, and the company had trucks and backhoes, and I would ride with him, and I remember going to some of the job sites, and that's when Southern California, you know, was booming and was really building, especially that San Fernando Valley area. So they did a lot of work exclusively for Los Angeles' Power and Water Division. So they put in a lot of the water mains and things like that. So I remember that, and going with him on the jobs, and I remember my mom, you know, being at home doing the other things, and that's kind of probably my earliest memories of them for the most part.
So when you left on this trip, where were you and your family going?
We were going to the Greater Cincinnati area to see my grandparents for Thanksgiving, which had been my father's mom and dad. And the area, I believe it's called Milford, Ohio, which is
Okay.
I don't remember if it's a suburb of Cincinnati or not, but that's where we were going. And it was Thanksgiving time, and off we went.
So, what do you remember early on in the flight? Do you remember boarding, any sights, smells, and what you thought of the aircraft and the people around you?
What I remember, and I have, it's kind of strange because I have some very strong memories, very vivid memories of part of this, and kind of hazy memory of other parts of it. When we were boarding the aircraft in Los Angeles, they put us on an aircraft, and not the crash incident aircraft. They put us on a different aircraft, and that aircraft had some sort of issue with the main door sealing. So they brought in they brought a mechanic in, and they messed with the door for a while, and it was just taking too long. So the airline decided to switch us to a different aircraft. which of course was the aircraft that crashed later. And I don't have after that time, I don't have a whole lot of memory basically of the flight per se. I have memories of the incident, but not so much of the flight per se. I can't really recall anything that jumps out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, can you tell us where you and your family were seated in the airplane?
Towards the rear of the aircraft, not at the very back, but towards the rear. Behind the wings. So in between the wings and the total at the rear of the aircraft.
Okay. So it's just before 9 p.m. and the airplane is descending. The crew attempts a visual approach to the runway, but because of construction going on, the runway approach lights and the middle marker beacon for the airport were actually not operating, which, as it turns out, the crew knew about at the time. And with deteriorating weather conditions, the crew attempted a visual approach in the dark. At over 9,000 feet short of the runway and at an altitude of 875 feet mean sea level, the Convair 880 struck a group of trees and ultimately ended up impacting the ground. So, Chris, tell us what you remember about the flight, or at that time that the crash happened. What are your recollections?
My recollections of the end of that flight, which ultimately ended as a crash, was I remember like a boom, boom, bang. And I remember a whole lot of fire, and that's about the end of my recollection right up until that time.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So after the aircraft had come to a rest at the time, what do you remember at that point, if anything?
I don't remember anything except I remember being picked up, picked up out of my seat.
So TWA hostess Ellie Kurtock ended up finding you. So is that who took you out of your seat? And do you recall that moment?
Yes, that's exactly what I remember. I have to talk to Ellie a lot. Yeah, we were in the same hospital afterwards, and she also wrote me like this 20-page letter because when we were well enough to travel, we were going back to California, and she wanted to give me something, but nothing that I would outgrow or I would forget. So she wrote me like this 20-page letter, and she described everything that happened from the time we got on the airplane and clear out through the hospital, basically. So it really helped me put things back into place. I mean, the memories that I had, it really helped me recall more of what occurred. So yes, she picked me up. My seats, my row of seats, were out of the aircraft in the snow on the ground, of course. And I remember being picked up, yes. And she, when she stepped out of the aircraft, she said she was still in the fuselage. She stepped down and out of the aircraft, and the first thing she saw was me still strapped in my seat. So.
Wow.
And then she took me in.
Where did she immediately take you after she took you from your seat?
There was some homes, or a home, not too far away from where this took place. So she picked me up, carried me, and there were some people that were coming from the houses, and there was, I don't know if it was a secondary explosion or what exactly occurred, because that part's pretty fuzzy, and I don't have anything in writing on that as well. And it kind of blew her or both of us through a barbed wire fence, and it cut her up pretty bad. And I already had a big laceration across my forehead, and along with a broken tib fib on my left leg. So I was kind of battered a little bit, and she caught even the brunt, even more from the barbed wire fence. Wow.
So your sister survived the crash as well. How old was she at the time?
2.5.
2.5, wow. And what happened to her immediately after the impact?
She was under some debris, and she actually was not totally under, but partially under some debris, and got stepped on by a firefighter.
Oh, jeez.
And he happened to see her, and then removed the debris and picked her up, and her wounds were way worse than mine. She was burned. She had a broken hip. She was hurt much worse than I, and that's how she came to be. That's how they found her. Was basically they stepped on her, if you will. They figured that she would just spit out of the aircraft when the fuselage had broke in 3 pieces and the fuselage broke apart. Her row of seats, she would just the momentum just tossed her out. So
wow. Now you mentioned all of your injuries, but how long was your recovery?
I was in the hospital. Well, my sister was in longer, of course, and we came back. It was the first of January, or the first part of January of '68. So we were in there a month and a half in the hospital.
Wow. And do you remember what that was like, being in the hospital for so long? What do you remember about those moments?
Yeah, I remember a lot. So here's part I don't remember. Even to this day, I was told this, and this was written down. When they were bringing survivors into the hospital in Kentucky, I don't know if we were in Cincinnati. I don't remember. I think it was Florence Hospital. Anyways, can't remember exactly. But by happenstance, they brought my sister in, and they laid her next to me in the hospital. And I saw my sister, and I ID'd her. I said, "Hey, that's my sister." And they said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes." I don't remember that. I was told that, and that was written down in this letter that she got, that Ellie wrote for me. But I don't remember that. So they put us together. And my stay in the hospital, what I remember is blood tests. Every day they would come in and they would prick the end of my fingers and take blood for a blood test. And this nurse who took care of me, I would see her, I would associate her with what was going to happen, and I would just cry. And she would sing to me to calm me down, and she would take do this blood test every single day I was there. I never forgot that. It's like a little pincushion.
Wow.
So that's probably my most vivid memory of that. And my grandmother on my mother's side, who became pivotal in my recovery and raising me, she would take me outside in a wheelchair. I had a broken hip fib, and she would push me around, and we would go outside and get fresh air. And I remember that part too. So that's my memories, basically.
Wow. Now, tragically, of course, you lost your parents in the crash. At what point did you realize they were gone?
Probably maybe a month or so later, and I can't really tell you about when or when I realized that, but that's actually in this letter that Ellie wrote me, because I was starting to become withdrawn, and that's when it was becoming pretty obvious that my parents weren't coming back. So that's kind of what I remember. I don't remember a specific time, but that's what I was told, and that's kind of the way it went.
So, after the proverbial dust had settled, where did you end up? Did family take you in after that?
Yes, on my mother's side, my mother's mother and father, they're the ones that basically took custody of my sister and I and raised us for all intents and purposes, and exactly what happened. They raised us, and there was a little bit of a family battle because my dad's mom and my dad's parents, they wanted to take us, but ultimately we ended up with my mom's parents because of the familiarity, because we saw them much more often than we saw my dad's side of the family, which was back in Cincinnati area. So.
Wow.
So that's a little bit of a family battle there that lasted for a short period of time,
mm-hmm.
and I think that probably caused some hard feelings, on down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah, but it is what it is, and very lucky that I had the upbringing that I did, considering what had happened to me as a child. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How were you able to mentally cope with what had happened? I mean, I assume you and your sister formed really quite a close bond because of this, even more so than you normally would be being siblings.
Yeah, I think it's probably easier for us to cope because of our age. Now, if this would have happened, 10 years later, maybe it would have been way more difficult. But yeah, I never ever considered myself a victim. We weren't victims; we were survivors, and that's how I've lived my entire life. When that comes around, I mean, I guess it'd be easy, especially in this day and age. Oh, I had such a horrible childhood. Don't you people owe me something? It seems like our whole society is that way. Well, society doesn't owe you anything, and I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor, and I never let that get in my way of me getting to what I needed to do. So there it is.
So now here's where the story kind of takes on a new interesting dimension. So later on in life, after you're grown now, you become a firefighter and amazingly also a pilot. At what point did you know you wanted to become a firefighter? And do you think what had happened to you when you were quite young informed that decision?
There was never really anything that pointed me toward the fire service. My grandparents were involved in agriculture. So, I mean, that's what I became involved in. And up until my early 20s, I farmed. We farmed rice and peaches and walnuts and that kind of stuff. My grandparents had cattle when I was really young, and then they got rid of the cattle and entered into other types of agriculture. And that's what I was doing, and that's what I was going to school for, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then when I was about 22, I guess, a buddy of mine that I grew up with was a firefighter for our local fire department. And he says, "Hey, you ought to come be a volunteer." And I said, "Yeah, I don't have time for that kind of stuff." But I did anyhow, and I became a volunteer, and it put the biggest hook in me, and I thought, I had a lot of conversation with my wife. I'm like, maybe I want to make a career change here. I really, really enjoyed the fire department. And sure enough, I joined the fire department, and I spent 32 years, and I retired as a division chief with CAL FIRE. So, yeah. Did it play a part? I don't know. But when I was I guess I was 19, I learned how to fly. And my grandmother was none too pleased about me learning how to fly. She had just, she had raised me after the evil airplane had taken away her daughter and her son-in-law and damn near killed her grandkids. And she never saw the airplane like I saw the airplane. So she was very, very unhappy.
And how did that come about that you wanted to be a pilot? I mean, so the average person listening to this interview, that sounds, it's mind-boggling. I mean, it would sound crazy to some people, but I mean, how did that come about that, you wanted to fly after all this?
I tell people, you ever been in a car accident?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Do you still drive around in a car? Well, yeah. Okay, same thing. And they said, no, it's not the same. I said, yeah, it kind of is the same. Flight's a magical thing, and it always will be. It'll always hold a place that's near and dear to my heart, regardless of the experiences that occurred to me when I was 5 years old. Love to fly. To this day, love to fly. I haven't been current in a long time because of the cost of aviation, sadly. It's out of reach, for most of the population, and that's a crime, but that's too bad. Flight is awesome, and it never got, what happened to me never got in the way of me wanting to learn how to fly or fly today.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Good for you. Good for you. So the other, reading through this, the story, the other fascinating thing to me is that you kept such a close relationship with the TWA hostess, Ellie Kurtock. after this incident, what was that relationship like with her growing up? You guys must have kept in close contact, I'm assuming?
After we came back from California, we stayed in contact, and then that faded away. And I often wondered what had happened to Ellie over the years, and I never heard a word. And on the 50th anniversary of that crash, my sister and I were talking, and that came up again. We had wondered what had happened because we never heard anything more from her from all those years. And about a month later, I got this handwritten letter, and I opened up this letter, and it said, "Please tell me I have found you." And it was Ellie, and she wrote me a letter, and included her phone number, and so I went and I called this number, and I talked to her husband, and she was at the grocery store, was out, and he goes, "We'll call when she goes back because this has been first and foremost on her mind forever." And then maybe half an hour later she called, and we probably talked for 3 hours, and it was phenomenal. And it was the same thing. She had wondered, what had happened, and so I kind of spent hours filling her in on what had happened. And she's an awesome woman, and and what I owe, I would never be able to repay. But she was pivotal in me surviving that accident. I'm a believer in that.
Did she give you? I mean, that must have been, being much older than you and remembering in vivid detail everything that happened during the wreck. That whole incident must have been quite haunting for her, I imagine.
Yeah, because the crew that she flew with was killed. There was one other flight attendant that survived. Sheila O'Brien, I believe, was her name. I think she survived, but the others perished. And she told me later that after she had healed, that she attempted to go back to flying, and she was unable to do so. So she left the aviation industry after that, and I don't really remember what she had done afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So,
now,
yeah.
I know it's difficult to say, but looking back, how do you think this tragic incident changed you as a person?
I don't know. Like I said, it happened at such a young age. I don't really know if it changed me as a person. I think it set me on a course to be a certain type of person. But again, I was never a victim, not a victim, and I think that's probably what it really taught me more than anything else. Is I was never a victim. I'm a survivor, and I think that's what set me down a path in life, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been it's an amazing story, and I know that our listeners are also going to find it a fascinating story. And I thank you for taking the time to talk with us about the incident today.
My pleasure.